So thanks again all for joining. We're going to give it a few more minutes for folks to get in, but really excited to have everybody here. And the meeting is being recorded. We'll probably edit it, so no worries if we miss anything or make any mistakes. We can go ahead and switch that up before we publish this online, but we're just going to give it a few minutes for folks to get in. In the meantime, you should be able in the chat at least to send a message to any of the co-hosts. So that includes me and the 4 panelists that you see pinned here. And if you have any special comments or questions that you want to see us talk about or raise relevant to the topics that we're discussing, feel free to shoot me a message. You can find my name, Stylianos Scott Karolidis. I'll actually make that easier for you all. I'll just use my Scott name. You can find me in the chat and shoot me a quick message. We've already got one. Great. Thanks for coming here, Darian. Today is just a panel with the folks that you see on your screen here, and we're going to be talking about some political issues, advocacy here in New York State, things that are important to us. You are welcome to stay for the entire length. It'll probably go for about 30 to 40 minutes, but no worries if you can't stay the entire time. And we've got a couple special guests who I'm really excited to introduce in a couple of minutes. I know we're vamping here. Always take the first few minutes of a Zoom to wait for people to join, but want to make sure it's a little bit engaging. Part of the reason we're doing this today is because a lot of folks in the YI network got really involved in advocacy this year. We had over, I want to say 1,300 people send an email to their legislators, and that was really, really exciting. That is a lot of people reaching out to their local politicians. And what's really great about that is people that were previously not always engaged, people that don't always know how to reach out to their politicians or that you can at all, how does it matter? And it's really exciting to see more people getting involved. The more that we get involved, the more we get heard, the more our issues are paid attention to, and that's really great. I'm going to give it one more minute for folks to join, and then we're going to start with introductions and begin the event. Should get like music for this. I don't want to, the Jeopardy music is at the top of my head, but I've got to imagine some like nice, pleasant waiting room music, or the elevator music that they call Muzak. No, I think everyone would get very upset with me if I did so. All right. It's about to be 4:05. I think we can get started and keep letting folks in. As a reminder, everybody, this event is being recorded. So it's really mostly just going to be the folks that you see pinned on the screen, but just to let you know that we'll be publishing this online, so you may get caught in some of the gallery views. Good evening, I should say maybe good afternoon. My name is Scott Karolidis. I'm Director of Government Relations here at YAI, and really excited to welcome you all to our panel event tonight. This is an event talking about politics, policy in New York State, and the importance of advocacy. And we're going to hear from 3 really exciting guests about all of that, issues that affect people with disabilities, the people that work with them, and everything else in between. We've got to focus on New York State here tonight, but I'll give a couple shout outs throughout the event to some things happening in California and other states. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Ken. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ken Reedy, and I am the Hudson Valley Supervisor for Curriculum and Workforce Development. I'm very happy to be here.
Happy to have you here, Ken. Miriam.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Miriam Franco. I am a parent of a child with multiple disability. I also work as a family liaison for one of the regional support centers located at Einstein, Montefiore, and very happy to be here today.
Thanks for making it, Miriam. And finally, Assembly Member.
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here today. I am Chris Burdick and represent the 93rd Assembly District in New York State, which is in northern Westchester County, going up to the Putnam line and over to Connecticut. And among the municipalities I represent is a little over half of the city of White Plains and other municipalities to the north. I sit on the New York State Assembly Standing Committee on People with Disabilities, and I also chair its subcommittee on employment opportunities for people with disabilities.
Thanks for making it tonight, Assembly Member. Really appreciate it. And with that, I think we've got a lot of questions. Really excited to take you all into it. I'm going to make a note before we do. We unfortunately had a cancellation from a self-advocate tonight, and so we won't have a self-advocate or person that we support on the panel. The reason I'm making this call out is it's really important when we talk about issues facing people with disabilities that we have someone representing folks and have someone speaking from their personal experience or perspectives. So tonight we're going to keep it a little bit policy focused, a little bit staff focused, so that we avoid speaking about folks with disabilities when they don't have the opportunity to voice their perspective. As the self-advocates say, it's not about us without us, and we can't do that tonight. So we're going to get right into it, starting with the state budget. For those of you that weren't following, New York State just passed a couple of weeks ago their budget for the next fiscal year. And every year when New York State passes their budget, it's really an opportunity for all different sorts of priorities to get heard. This is where they decide spending for the year, lots of different policy choices and things like that. Let's start off with Assemblymember Burdick. This year's budget included a 5.4% cost of living adjustment increase and up to $3,000 in bonuses for staff. Do you think you could talk to us a little bit about how Albany came to this decision and what were the legislature's priorities in detailing the budget for services in the O agencies?
Well, that's a terrific question. I think that I'm going to first start about the last part of your question, which is priorities for the O agencies. You know, we went through a period of the previous governor's tenure, some 10 years in which the O agencies, which I think most on the call understand that those are agencies such as the Office of People with Disabilities and Office for Mental Health and other agencies that are just loosely grouped as the O agencies. But year after year of austerity budgets really resulted in a real inability for the O agencies to be able to meet the mission that they're charged with carrying out. And we were very pleased to see that Governor Hochul's budget from the outset recognized those deficiencies. We had been working quite hard with the governor and her representatives, including Carrie Neufeld, the head of OPWDD, the new commissioner who has a completely different outlook than her predecessor, to say, look, you've got to provide the funding for these agencies so they can carry out their missions. I think we've done significantly better in that area, and I was very pleased to see the turnaround with respect to the funding. With respect to the second question that you've had in terms of providing for higher levels of funding and of wages for those who are in the home care field, and we see that as the highest priority. And I was among many who supported fair pay for home care, which is a measure that made it really simple. 150% of the minimum wage across the board. Well, we couldn't get that. We had hoped that we might be able to get that. We have the 5.4% COLA and the $3,000 bonus. And We also have that there's going to be an increase of $3 an hour. That's going to be spread over 2 years, $2 in the fall this year and $1 next year. Again, we were hoping for more. At least it's a step in the right direction upon which we can build. We acutely understand the dire need to provide for decent pay for people who are providing the home care. I have heard time and again where a person with disabilities can't just absolutely depend upon those services. How can someone get a job if they have no one who can help them with their daily needs? People who physically need to be bathed and have their personal needs attended to, they're not going to be able to get up, be clothed, and go to a job. And so this is a critical starting point, and we're acutely aware of that. So was it what we wanted? It was definitely not what we wanted, but we're at least much better off than we have been in the past.
Thank you, Assembly Member. And I'll also note for the audience here, fair pay for home care was really revolutionary legislation that would have gotten home care workers up to 150% of minimum wage. Though the legislation, the way it was written, would not have affected our staff because our staff fall under the OPWDD framework, and that legislation affected the public health law rather than the mental hygiene law. And so there was a parallel effort to reach an 11% cost of living adjustment increase that would have gotten rates close to getting that wage increase. Although, as you heard from the Assembly member, they fought very hard and got to the 5.4% instead. I'll flip it to Ken. From hearing all of that, and specifically from the staff member's perspective, hearing about wages, what do you think staff needed most from the state budget? And do you think Albany got close to those needs?
Thank you. And honestly, like, being here is great. And Mr. Burdick, I mean, it is a step in the right direction. And just having a leader here with us to discuss these issues is another great step in the right direction. Now to come back to the question, short answer, no. The field needs more. It's just, when you look at, and I appreciate what you're saying, sir, that you wanted more, and 150% over minimum wage is really what we should be striving for. Our DSPs, especially the past 2 years, what they've had to navigate through, being stuck in homes for hours and hours, being not only staff, but for many of the people that we support, being surrogate family members, being a psychiatrist, navigating a world that we don't really understand, and trying to help people with disabilities understand that world when we can't make sense of it. And like, the 5.4% increase is nice, but right now starting salary for a DSP is minimum wage. So you're talking about $30 a week. So yeah, I guess a DSP can, buy a half a gallon of or a half a tank of gas, but it's a drop in the ocean. And when you're working in our field, I mean, some of the stats you read about, I read an article recently that 90% of people with developmental disabilities will be a victim of sexual abuse at some point in their life. 90%. And for parents who are on this call, I apologize, because that number's got to be terrifying. It's got to be absolutely terrifying. And these are the battles that DSPs are taking on day in and day out. And you shouldn't have to put a cost on caring for someone with a disability, but government-wise, the cost that they put on it is, they say that's a minimum wage job. They're saying that caring for someone with a disability is minimum wage worth. And it's, to me, the biggest systemic failure of government in our country. And I really do appreciate that we're moving in the right direction, and it is a step, but it's a small step, and a lot more steps need to be made to really pay the DSPs what they're worth. What they've done over the past couple of years has been phenomenal. What they've been tasked with, and 5.4% is it's nice, but it needs to be more.
Amen to that, Ken. I think a lot of folks share that sentiment. And like the assembly member said, there's been about a decade of austerity. That 5.4% COLA increase, which I'll note is an increase on the rate rather than the wage. And so it should look like a little bit more, thankfully, to the wages than 5.4% of minimum wage. But that increase was in some ways unprecedented because I think for the last 10 years, the increase has never breached 1%. Oftentimes or 0.5% because it was a very difficult political situation. Although I think a lot of folks agree that we are really trying to rectify something that needs to be 10 years ahead. We need 10 years of steps to get to where we should be today. I'm interested to hear, Miriam, from your perspective as a parent about everything that you're hearing, if there was anything in the budget that was important to you this year and what you think is important for us to focus on.
I think like everyone else, I think we are heading in a step in the right direction, but it's just a Band-Aid. Our DSP workers, it's a crisis, okay? These are professionals that provide skilled work, and they should be paid as professionals, okay? The impact that COVID made is just, it just added on to something that was already in crisis, okay? We've been advocating for years, and I think, I'm happy to see they're acknowledging that, it is a problem and that they are taking steps to revise some of that, but wages need to increase. A direct support worker is not able to live on minimum wage and support a family. It's not realistic. Okay, so that we know. So I would have liked to see more, and more needs to be done. We still need to keep advocating for more to be done. Some of the other things on the budget that were concerned to me are the early intervention programs. That's something that has been underfunded for so long. And again, COVID just created just another shortage with staff. There's greater waiting lists. There are programs that are closing. This is a critical time. It's from 0 through 3, a very critical time for our kids to be, and it's a very short span of time for us to be able to help in their development. So for these programs to be underfunded is just it's a crisis. It's a crisis, and we need to continue advocating for that, and we will continue advocating for these programs to be funded. It's critical. It's vital for our kids to be able to get the services for their development, and it's to be able to once they enter, school, for them to be able to already have some services for them. So
it is definitely critical. I appreciate your perspective, Miriam, and love being here with you all. I feel like as a director of government relations, I'm basically a lobbyist, and what I often, it's easy for me to spend a lot of time in rooms with lots of policy folks and having those high-level discussions. So it's always really great to be here with you all and having this very clear-eyed sight of what is important, why we're doing what we're doing, why it's so critical that we fight for all of this funding increases. And I appreciate that anytime anyone in disability services is talking about state politics, eye is always on the wages ball. I really do think that's the most important issue of our industry right now. And I am glad that all of us here are aligned on how important that is. That's our number one priority, and we're working to make sure the situation there improves. I'm going to take us a little bit out of the budget because I bet you we could spend an entire evening and probably get a lot of perspective from everybody about wages and spending. But I'd like to hear outside of the budget, and let's start with you, Miriam, and then I'll flip it to the Assembly member. Outside of the budget, what other policies are you looking to see New York State adopt this year, or talk about, debate, and move on this year?
Well, one of the other things that I think is workplace transition for older adults. I think it's important that there are incentives created for employers to hire adults with disabilities. I think that it's something that should be considered, and I think it's important. We do have a large population of adults aging out of DOE and that are not employed or are not able to find employment, and that are very capable, with the support to be able to be employed and be self-sufficient. I think that's one thing that one of many things that is important.
Thanks, Miriam. I actually, and again, I regret that we don't have a self-advocate on, because I think when I talk to the people that we support, the number one thing they're always worried about and telling me they want more of is employment services. Everybody loves it. And a reminder for those of you listening, you can also shoot me a message in the chat if there's anything you want me to mention, bring up, or ask about. No worries if you don't have any ideas, though. We've got lots of questions to go through. So Assembly member, the same question to you. What are some priorities you're looking to push this year? And I know session, for those of you who are listening, session are the days that legislators in Albany do actual legislative work. So they talk, they debate, they vote on bills. There's only, I think, 19 session days left. So there's not a lot of time. But Assembly member, are there any priorities you're hoping to move in these 19 session days?
There are, and I'm also working with my colleagues, both on the committee for people with disabilities, as well as other members of the Assembly who have been working in this space for some years. And we have coming up next week on May 4, Disability Day, in which we are working to get a package of bills to help people with disabilities in their daily lives to improve as well their opportunities for employment and to help to reduce barriers to employment. So we are hopeful that we're going to get a number of legislative proposals across the finish line. And I think I touched upon the fact that we are very pleased with the new commissioner of OPWDD, and I'm very pleased that she and her staff has been supportive of many of the proposals that we're working to bring forward. A number that I am doing, one is there's a provision in the New York State finance law called preferred source. And what that's about is to provide some benefits to, well, it's a two-way street. One is that employers that do business with state agencies, if they otherwise meet the bidding requirements, those who are providing employment for people with disabilities are considered what's called a preferred source and will have better opportunity to be awarded the contract. Unfortunately, that's a creaky statute that really needs to be modernized, makes it more difficult for both agencies as well as employers to make it work. I'm working with the New York State Industry for the Disabled, which is a nonprofit entity which works very closely with the state agencies and basically works on behalf of the agencies. And we're going to be amending that, or at least attempting to. Also working to provide a pilot program for employers to say, we see that Hannaford, Price Chopper, Goodwill Industries have shown that they can hire people with disabilities And some of those entities are profit-making entities. How can we give them a blueprint to show them how to make the accommodations that are needed for people with disabilities? How can you meet them in terms of what their capabilities are and what their capacity is? Because we know that people with disabilities want to work and they have the capabilities of working. So identify those capabilities and work with them on that. And so I'm working on those bills. One area in the schools area is I'm working on a bill that would require same-day notification to a parent or guardian if any kind of behavioral intervention is used with a child with disabilities, whether it's seclusion or any kind of physical restraint, because there have been concerns that it could be weeks, even months, before the parent or guardian becomes aware that a restraint was used. So those are some of the bills that we're working with.
Happy to hear that there's actually a very broad spectrum of bills that you're working on, Assembly Member, and especially the employment thing obviously is really huge. Love to be clued into whatever blueprint that looks like for private companies, because like I mentioned, people love employment services. I think one, it's nice to earn money. That's certainly why I work. And of course, two, it makes people, it's not a reason I work all days, but getting out of the house and going and doing things, feeling useful, seeing people is a benefit in and of itself. Although I think many days I would rather stay home. But happy to hear that you're working on those things. I'm getting a few messages in the chat, and I think one really interesting one was about making sure we remind everybody about how important the work that DSPs are doing. And I think that goes back to our earlier budget conversation, but also, curious to hear, Ken, if there are any other non-budget policies that you have been following, looking at, thinking about in the state, and especially anything, we talk a lot about wages, and I think that needs to be our number one priority at all times. But I'm curious if there's anything else, any other policies that might help ensure the work that DSPs are doing is elevated, acknowledged, and they're rewarded for it.
I don't know if there's specific policies, but overall, I think the biggest thing that affects our field is the lack of visibility, and whatever policies can be put in place to show more of what the great work that DSPs do, some of the obstacles that are in the way, showing people with disabilities succeeding, share. I mean, you don't get a lot of media attention for this field, which is a shame. And, I think it all kind of ties in. It's really easy to keep wages in this field down when the visibility is not there. If the visibility is increased, I think that helps everything. That will help bring down abuse. That will help bring up wages and funding. So I think overall visibility. The other thing I'd like to see more of is just programs that put technology in the hands of people with disabilities. It's been way too long. I've been in this field about 25 years. I've watched people at the vocational level stuff envelopes for about 25 years. It's time. We're in the 21st century. We need to get computers, tablets. We need to get these in the hands of people with disabilities, give them the tools to work in the 21st century. We've been lucky here in the Hudson Valley YI to award a number of technology grants, but I believe it was like 150 grants, which was, we were able to put iPads and technology in the hands of people with disabilities. But, in the day hab alone in Tarrytown, when filled, there's almost 300 individuals. So 150 for the region is not, it's kind of again, another drop in the ocean. So being able to really get technology in the hands of people, and whether it's through more grants, increased funding, different policies, incentivizing technology. One of the rooms at our Tarrytown program, we've basically renovated the whole room and we're turning it into a multimedia podcasting studio for people with disabilities to be able to get their voice out. Took a lot of fundraising and creative donation solicitations to get that room up and running, but we're May 13th, we're having our official ribbon cutting and grand opening for that studio. We're really excited. But you know, with getting programs like that up and running, it shouldn't have been that difficult. The technology is there. The technology has been there. And just being able to bring people with disabilities forward into the 21st century, again, will increase their visibility and increase different jobs. You know, you can have somebody, why can't someone with a disability run their own podcast and their job is selling advertising for their podcast? This is the 21st century. Those jobs are out there, and there are people with disabilities that are well equipped to do these jobs. They just don't have the resources. So those are things I'd like to see more of, like our field and government helping us to embrace technology more.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I've actually got messages saying that they appreciate what you're sharing as well, which is really great. We love to hear it. I actually always hear phenomenal reviews about every single technology program, both from the people that we support, our staff, and politicians who I talk to. They say, you know, how is this working out? We really want to hear more about it. And everyone is really happy to hear that things are going well, and totally agree that we could use a lot more support on that front. I think, you know, as the years go by, the state is beginning to be a little more accommodating towards experimental ideas, assistive technology, and spending money on technology, because I think the evidence for it is very strong in terms of how it helps provide better support, how people using technology are happier, and just in general, it seems like you get a lot more bang for your buck when you're spending money on high-tech facilities. To your first point, Ken, also regarding visibility, that's why I'm so glad we're having this panel. And it almost makes me feel like I want to do a monthly one with staff, although God knows if I could pull that off every month, scheduling wise. Certainly something to think about. To a lot of you folks who are listening, if you are a staff member or DSP, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Shoot me an email. I really absolutely love hearing from you. I need to know as many of you as possible, because you can be in an event like this and you can have your voice heard. It's very important. We can do an op-ed, we can do virtual events, we can get you elevated otherwise. And I'm sure, as you know, we thank again Assemblymember Burdick for being here. Our representatives enjoy hearing from you too, because they need to know what's important to their constituents, right? That's the only way they know how to do what's important for their district. Assemblymember, I saw your message. Do we still have you for the next 10 minutes?
Yeah, that should be fine.
Perfect. I know we've got a lot of questions, and so we're sort of going through them a little bit faster because I think we all have a lot to say, which is really great. I love it when that happens. I think we'll switch to an advocacy perspective here. And I've got a couple different questions, so I'll try to word them differently. For Ken, I'd be interested if you have any thoughts on so far what YI's been doing just this last year alone about advocacy, and if you have any advice for people who want to be more involved, if there's anything that you've done or you've experienced that you would recommend to others, or what you think other people should do to make sure their voices are heard, to be better advocates.
Don't be afraid to get your voice out there. I mean, honestly, there's not a secret formula. Just do it. Just do it. There's so many avenues now out there, whether it's email or social media. If you want to advocate, send your government officials emails. I write them, call their offices. I think for myself, over the course of the pandemic, it just kind of got to a point where I'm just going to keep doing it. Where I see something that needs to be done, I'm going to do something. At times the road was bumpy, but when it comes to advocating, even when you get a no or a door slammed in your face, you just got to keep plugging forward. Especially when you're working in this field. We're it. You know, when again you look at the stats with abuse and with people with disabilities, like we're the front line, we're the advocates. Like we have to be the ones out there. So, you know, my advice would just be when you see something that needs to be done, do it. Be the one. Don't think that someone else is going to pick up the slack. Be the one that's going to do it, whatever that is. And whether, you know, you're on here and you see this and, you know, you think maybe I should email him, and then you think, nah, someone else will do it. No, just do it. Shoot out that email, make that phone call, shoot me an email if you want to know, you know, what we're working on here in the Hudson Valley and you want some advice on that and how I got that stuff done. But I just got to a point where like it's not going to be anybody else. So I have to, if I want something done, I got to do it myself. So if I had to offer any sort of advice, that would be it. Just do it.
I think that's great advice, Ken. I really love the way that you framed it. And it's something that, you know, again, I wish we had a self-advocate on, and so I'm going to work harder scheduling that. But I think it's a lesson that we all understand. There's lots of people advocating for us in lots of different capacities. There's people, you know, I'm advocating for staff and the people that we support when I have meetings with government officials, but you are your best advocate. I only know what I can say because I've had a conversation with someone with experience or perspective, but that person was a staff member, was a self-advocate, was someone that we supported, was a family member. Only you know your experience, and you are the best possible person to share that and make yourself heard. To that point, Miriam, I know you're a parent and you are also probably a phenomenal advocate for your child and, of course, for the things that are important to you. What advice would you give outside of what we just heard? Feel free to plus it up. What advice would you give to someone who's interested in getting involved in advocacy, who wants to be a more effective advocate?
When I started out, I actually started out working as an assistant in a special education program. I never knew that I was going to be thrown into this direction, but I really didn't know a lot about advocacy. I kind of like questioned a lot of things and didn't really have sort of a direction, but I knew that I just needed to, you know, get out there and do what I needed to do to be able to get the services that my son needed and to be able to provide the support that he needed. And it goes to what Ken was saying, you just have to do it. You just have to advocate. There's really not a formula to it, like he says, but you have to be adamant about it. You know, if there's, you know, if that door closes, well, then I'm just going to go on to the next door, you know, till I get an answer to what I need, or I get the supports and services that I need, or that my child needs. There's really a lot of ways to do it. I think that social media is a big platform that a lot of people are using to talk about, you know, common issues that are happening in their lived experience. And there are a lot of groups that have expanded on social media and really voiced, you know, the issues that are happening with people with disability. I think that for everything, it's a fight, and we need to be louder when we want things to change, you know, to make these policy changes and to make systems change or systemic change. I go ahead and I cheer people on, you know, if it doesn't work that way, go on to the next, you know, and try. Don't give up, you know. We are the voices of our children, and we are advocating for them to be able to meet their needs. So I think that, you know, we just need to keep advocating.
Thank you, Miriam. I know a lot of parents probably on the call today too know very well how important advocacy is, and sometimes you are the only person standing up for your child, and it can be lonely and difficult, but it's definitely worth it. To your point about social media, follow YAI on Twitter, follow YAI on Instagram. I've been trying to put a few more political posts out there, but we need you to like and retweet and amplify us. I'd love to go ahead and call out the politicians when we need to and remind them what we need them to do, but we need you following us on social media to make that more effective. So check us out. And again, if anyone here is interested in advocacy, you can shoot me an email, post that once more. I love to hear from you and get you involved in these types of events. I know we only have a few more minutes left. So Assembly Member, I'd like to pitch sort of the question to you. You've been a representative for some time now, and I'm sure you've heard from thousands, probably tens of thousands of constituents. I'd be curious to hear, how can advocacy efforts be more effective? We use lots of different tactics like emails, phone calls, holding rallies, lobby meetings. Sometimes they're not all accessible. Sometimes they're difficult to get folks out to. I'd be curious to hear from you. What are the most effective tactics? What do you think could we do better to better reach our representatives? And what advice do you have for the folks here listening about advocacy?
I think it's a great question. And, you might have seen in the chat that I was just encouraging everybody to continue to do what they're doing in terms of advocacy. And, there is no one size fits all, but I would say that all of the above of what you've mentioned is effective. I would say that the more personal connection that you can make with your elected representative, the more effective it's going to be. And I would really urge people to identify who is it that represents them in Congress, who represents them in the state legislature. How about the governor? How about OPWDD? All of the above, you should be contacting them and try to be as concise as you can in what you want. If there's a bill that you're looking for, you say, I support this, and here's why, and be as concise as you can with it. But the personal connection always is the most effective. I have constituents and an open door policy in which I do my very best to meet with constituents. In the virtual world, it's been mostly through Zoom, but we are transitioning a bit back, if we can, to in person, though while we're in session, there's fewer opportunities for that. But I think all of the methods that have been described are effective, but the most effective is the personal connection.
That personal connection in every part of our lives. I think a lot of us recognize that when you have a personal relationship, one that's been built and developed with an individual, it's a lot easier to get them to do something and work with you and cooperate. And it's a good reminder for us when we're talking about advocacy, the more you see your representative, right? The more often you see them, meet with them, email them, call them, the more likely they'll develop that relationship with you, recognize you, work with you, and it will work much more effectively. That's also why that's really a big part of our project here, my project personally, to get lots more DSPs, more visible at more events, hold more things like this, do our interview series that we've had as well. These all go a really long way towards building what the assembly member was just talking about, that personal relationship. And that goes an incredible distance towards making sure we're heard, we get what we deserve, and that we're able to be effective advocates. I know it's almost 4:45, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. I also got a message. The Assembly Member's Chief of Staff, Heather Lackey, is here as well. Asked that I can put her email in the chat, which I just did. If you are in the Assembly Member's district, if you're a constituent, which, like he talked about earlier, is kind of like Northeast Westchester region. You can look it up online. The districts are always a little funny. You can reach out and let them know what your concerns are. They always, again, I'm speaking for you now, Assembly Member, but I know you guys love to hear from constituents all the time. I think, like he just talked about, it's so effective when you do something personal. Oh, it is, I spelled it wrong. Sorry, it is with an H at the end there. Oh, and I just sent it to her personally. Give me 1 minute, sorry about that. But anyway, thank you all for joining us today and listening, taking part. Some of you sent me messages. I read every single thing that I saw, even though I wasn't able to put them all out. But please send me an email, follow up. Desiree, I saw your message. Send me an email. I can actually answer that for you and talk to you about that a little bit. please send me an email, scott.carlides@yi.org. And of course, keep in touch. So the last thing I want to really remind you all about is Central Park Challenge, which is happening June 4th in, where you guessed it, Central Park at the Naumburg Bombshell. It's going to be a really phenomenal event. And this, like many of our other online advocacy events, our interview with Senator Roxanne Persaud, our interview with Assemblymember Tom Abenanti, our interview with Assemblymember Yulin Yu, Assemblymember Zoran Mamdani, are all these great visibility events that we're doing as part of Central Park Challenge, because advocacy is one of the elements of the event. And it's really great to see lots of folks out there. There's going to be lots of things, I say things, there's going to be banners, signposts, activities that include advocacy in some way. And I hope as many of you folks can show up. I'm actually going to find a link for that as well. But otherwise, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Assemblymember and Ken and Miriam, and really excited to see you all soon in Central Park.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, everybody.